This is the Ag Queen Podcast. This podcast explores the agriculture industry with the movers and shakers of those shaping it. Here's your host, Lori Boyer.
Greg Rhuele is my guest here today. He is the new executive director of National Sorghum Producers. He is not only new to the role, but the role is new to the organization. We'll talk more about that coming up. But Greg, let's talk about you first. Tell us about your background.
So thanks, Lori. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today. My background, I've been lucky. My career has been spent in agriculture from my formative days growing up on a pretty typical diversified Northwest Iowa farm with both crops and livestock to much of my career spent in association work in both the livestock and kind of the crop and seed sides of the industry. Those are the opportunities that I think really help position me well to come on board and stand alongside Tim Lust and the rest of the team at Sorghum to help move the ball forward at a time that's really exciting in the sorghum industry.
What made you decide to branch off of the operation, off of the farm, and do something like this?
Well, and that happened in the 80s, which for most people, that's about all you have to say, right? Is, well, in the 1980s, I had to make a choice. I had gone to college for a year, went back home, was certain that I was going to join Dad on the farm. And we went in and we'd made an offer on or we're getting ready to make an offer on an 80-acre farm with a little bit of a swine facility on it. And went into the bank, and the bank said, I don't think that we're going to stick our neck out that far, and 21% interest and all of those challenges. So for me, that was sort of the time. It was the challenges of the 80s farm crisis that pushed me toward a career off the farm, but still in agriculture. And so, things like working the farm bill. I've worked on about a half a dozen farm bills over my career. Being that advocate and that voice for farmers and ranchers with elected officials, principally in Washington, but also at the state legislature, really has kind of shaped me in a direction that made association work a very satisfying opportunity across about 3.5 decades of my career.
So where else have you worked then with association work?
So I started out of college with the National Cattlemen's Association in their government affairs office in D.C. I was a lobbyist that did the work on environmental issues. So all the sexy stuff, the Clean Water Act, private property rights, endangered species, wetlands laws, regulations on feedlots, all of that stuff fell into my lap, if you will, during my time in D.C. From there, and spent 5 years in Washington. My wife and I got married during that time. We decided, hey, this is not necessarily the place we want to start a family. And so had the chance to move to Nebraska and ran the Nebraska Cattlemen's Association for 10 years. Again, state and federal legislative activities. We grew the association over that time quite a bit. And then I got this little bit of a crazy bug that when Nebraska's first congressional district became vacant, Doug Beerider had been in that seat for about 25 years. I threw my hat in the ring at that point in time, and it was a crowded field. There were 12 candidates in the primary, 9 Republicans, 2 Dems, and an independent. Finished third in the primary. Unlike a horse race, a congressional primary doesn't pay 3 places deep. So then kind of stepped off into the seed industry and did association work there for 10 years. Moved here to Southwest Kansas and stepped in as a CEO for Servitech, a group that a lot of listeners would probably have some familiarity with, crop consulting and laboratory testing work, kind of in a 7-state area, but headquartered here in Southwest Kansas. Spent a year and a half in a startup just because I thought that'd be kind of something cool. And then Tim Lust called and said, hey, I need some help at Sorghum. Known Tim forever, ton of respect for him, and was happy to join the team here at Sorghum in November, not even 60 days ago.
And the executive director position, is this brand new to the association?
It is. So it's a little, it seems odd because everybody that knows Tim Luss thinks of Tim as as the executive director of Sorghum.
I was
And
going to say
he
that, but
has
yeah.
been for, yeah, he has, we just celebrated a 30-year career for Tim in Sorghum. And so what we've done, the board has really stepped in and said, we see tremendous opportunities in Sorghum. We need to develop the team that will allow the industry to take advantage of those opportunities. So Tim sits as the CEO of what we refer to as Team Sorghum. So he is in that CEO role. Then under that we have the sorghum checkoff. We have national sorghum producers, and then we have a group of subsidiary organizations, crop insurance and climate smart grants and other sustainability programs that we're developing, that all have someone in a leadership role in each of those areas. And so it's a way for us to really use Tim's time to its highest and best use, and provide the support that the association and the industry needs to take advantage of these opportunities.
So I think you answered this somewhat, but maybe a little bit more, and how the executive director's position will work with Tim's position, then how you're going to divide and how you're going to work
But
together as well.
yeah, exactly. No, great. It's a great question, Lori. It's an interesting one. I'm chuckling a bit because that's still being defined a little bit. I have years of experience in Washington. Obviously, I can step in and provide support there as we prepare for the rewrite of the Farm Bill. I've spoken to producer groups across the country and around the world, and so I can step in and fill that gap. The way Tim and I would describe that, the way we described it to the board a couple of weeks ago at our board meeting was, one, it's still being defined, and secondly, the best part of that opportunity is literally being almost interchangeable, in those roles. So if we need somebody in DC, whoever's schedule that fits in with the best heads to Washington. If we need to go visit with a producer group someplace, again, we've got the option. The option for optionality maybe is the right way to look at it. We can kind of deal that whichever way makes the most sense. And you know, that's not necessarily the role Tim was initially searching for. He was looking for a succession plan. At this point in my career, I'm not Tim's succession plan. I'm at the tail end of my career, not the beginning. And so, for right now, we've got work to do, and this provides Sorghum with an opportunity to really cover all the bases as well as we possibly can.
Will you have to relocate to Lubbock then?
That's a decision that's coming. Likely at least spend a significant amount of time. But right now, we've got so much travel that there's a lot of times travel for me out of Dodge City is a whole lot easier than travel. If I'm headed to Eastern Colorado, or I'm headed to Southwest Nebraska, or I'm headed to Manhattan, Kansas, I can get there in a half a day's drive. If I was in Lubbock, it's a full day's drive, or it's two plane rides, one or the other. And so, that's a discussion that continues to happen, but certainly we'll be spending time in the office, with the staff that we have there. And we've had so much growth, we're out of space in our building at Lubbock. And so whenever I come to Lubbock, I'm either camped out in the conference room or the corner of somebody's desk, or if somebody's traveling, I steal their office for a couple of days. But we are, it's such an exciting time, for us because of the growth and the opportunities that are in front of the national sorghum producers.
And then just to clarify, what is Tim Lust's official title then now?
Him as a CEO
Okay.
of, we would call it Sorghum or Team Sorghum. So,
Okay. All right. Yeah. I know this is probably still something you're formulating in your mind, but you've been there a little bit. You're familiar with the organization and managing some of the association work, as you mentioned. So I think it's a fair question. What would you say are your goals so far, being in this new role and being not only new
yeah,
role for you, but new role for the organization?
yeah, it's a fair question, Lori. Absolutely. There's several goals that I would have, and obviously they're congruent with the goals that the association has, as well. One is to take advantage of the experience that I have in the public policy process. So legislative and regulatory fronts, both working with whatever administration is in place to address disparities that exist today when you compare sorghum and other feed grains, corn being at the top of that list. And it's not to tear corn down at all. We love our brothers in the corn industry and look forward to working alongside them. But there have been instances where sorghum has sort of been forgotten about in that process. I'll give you a great example. A lot of talk in the last 18 months about biofuels, expanding biofuels production. The Inflation Reduction Act included a provision called 45Z, which is a blending tax credit for ethanol plants that would increase the amount of biofuels that they produce, ethanol being at the top of that list. There was just an announcement made about sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, another program that is a biofuels related program. Our job has to be to make sure that sorghum is on equal footing as a cereal grain that can be utilized to produce sustainable fuels, whether that be ethanol for our automobiles, or biodiesel for tractors, or sustainable aviation fuel for the airline industry. So we want to make sure that when these rules are written by the Department of Treasury, that we have references in there to both corn and sorghum as feedstock for those biofuels programs. So that's something that, with a background in association work and a background in public policy, I think I can help lend a shoulder to alongside Tim and others on the team. A second one is we're seeing acreage increases in sorghum right now. We see that for a lot of reasons. Certainly favorable price in many areas relative to corn because of the strong international demand that we have for sorghum. We see that because of opportunities for participation in some of the sustainability programs that are being kind of championed today. In fact, sorghum is one of the groups that was awarded a Climate Smart grant by USDA almost a year, about 6 months ago. And so we're working to deliver over $40 million in payments out of that Climate Smart grant to farmers who are sustainably producing sorghum that can grow, that can be moved into food, feed, and fuel programs and help meet those sustainability targets. So that's an area to help kind of contribute to as well. That's a people-driven process. We got to get the right people in place. We've got to be able to gather the data that demonstrates that level of sustainability that sorghum producers have in growing that crop, and then quantify that in the marketplace to their benefit. So those are two examples of areas. We're growing the association, so that's something that's near and dear to me, and then just being able to be visible on behalf of the industry in front of whatever audience that we have.
And I was just going to ask you, and I think it's a good segue into where are the economics at for sorghum? It sounds like things are good, positive.
They are good. There's two areas that I think are really good. One, the market continues to stay strong. China continues to be a big buyer of sorghum, not a surprise. But as we've seen kind of a slide in the price of other cereal grains, sorghum has maintained a fairly strong price advantage to corn in many markets today. So that's to me, that's a really good thing. The second is it's a positive response to a negative situation. The negative situation, it's right where I live. It's where you're familiar with the area as well. It's the water challenges that we have in the region around the Ogallala Aquifer. How do we address those in a way that still keeps active agricultural operations in place, but helps us begin to reverse that trend and level out, and then begin, hopefully over time, over generations, to restore the levels of water in the Ogallala Aquifer. I think sorghum has a role to play there that few other crops can play. We can produce a crop on less water. So if someone is in a position where their well pumped 1,000 gallons a minute at one point in time, and they're now down to 300, and that's real, sorghum is the replacement crop that can still produce a profitable crop at 300 gallons of water a minute out of that well. We're seeing a shift in forage production to sorghum forage. Some of that is baled as feed. Some of that is chopped as silage. And a real opportunity there for us to tell a sustainability story, not only around the feed, but around the animals that are fed that. So whether that's a feedlot that's producing beef in a sustainability program, look no further than Walmart and the work that they're doing on a sustainable beef program, or it's fed to dairy cows that are producing milk that goes into a sustainable yogurt or cheese or milk program. The opportunities for sorghum to be a contributing feedstock to that are tremendous. And so we continue to build those alliances and help those folks tell the story about how, about the role sorghum can play in contributing to a sustainable future.
You have plenty to do, don't you?
We do. That's what makes it great, though, right?
Right?
If we
You
were
don't want to get
sitting
bored.
around, that's right. If we're sitting around looking for stuff, then I get in trouble. Then I gotta stay busy.
Greg, we're almost out of time here today, but I do want to ask you, because I feel like I'd be remiss if we don't at least mention it here today, and you did earlier, Farm Bill. That is the talk of the town, has been for quite a while. Organizations wanting a new Farm Bill. I'm sure sorghum producers are no exception.
Absolutely. So sorghum was well positioned in 2023 to help support the redrafting of the Farm Bill. Obviously, that didn't happen. The clock expired. The clock ran out of time, if you will, and so Congress passed a 1-year extension. That extension expires at the end of September 2024. So there is a deadline looming out there, and I don't want anybody to come away from the call today thinking that the extension is indefinite. It's very definite. The more pressing need is around the continuing resolution. That's the funding part of the Farm Bill, and that expires on January 19th. We're not far from that deadline. That has to be dealt with soon. We've got a delegation from Sorghum that's headed to DC the second full week of January. So yeah, it seems early, like Congress is just beginning to wake back up after the holidays, but it's that urgent. The need for being in town, meeting with the administration, meeting with the four corners, and establishing those critical issues to sorghum as priorities to those elected officials and administrative officials is critical. So we'll be headed back out to DC shortly. Love to give an update after that. Maybe we'll have a better sense for what's happening, and would certainly be committed to spending time and join you on another interview where we could talk through those priorities as well.
And I will take you up on that for sure. And
Awesome.
most likely we'll be talking to you again here around Commodity Classic time.
Absolutely. I look forward to that as well.
Greg Rhuele, the new executive director for the National Sorghum Producers, my guest here today. I'm Lori Boyer.
Thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Ag Queen Podcast with your host, Lori Boyer.